Is it possible that the relentless pursuit of comfort, the deep human need to feel safe and secure, is actually the single most dangerous trap you could fall into? What if the soft, easy life you're conditioned to crave is slowly suffocating the person you were born to become? Think about the most resilient person you know, someone who seems unbreakable in the face of hardship. Do you truly believe they were just born that way, blessed with some innate toughness? Or do you have a quiet suspicion that their strength wasn't a gift, but something they had to build, piece by painful piece, in the lonely darkness of their own private battles? Welcome to the Wisdom Mind Library. I'm Daisy. This work teaches you how to walk into the darkest basement of your own mind, find the light switch, and get comfortable with whatever you find hiding in the shadows. This is the unfiltered story of David Goggins, a man who journeyed from the deepest pits of human suffering to the highest peaks of human achievement. It's a raw exploration of how our deepest pain can be sculpted into our greatest power. But to understand the man he became, we have to first walk through the fire that forged him. His account begins not with triumph, but with terror, in a place that was supposed to be a safe haven, his childhood home. Goggins invites us into his earliest memories, which are colored by the volatile and violent presence of his father, David Goggins. Outwardly, his father was a charismatic figure in their town of Williamsville, New York, the successful owner of a skating rink and bar. But behind the facade of success was a monster. David, his brother, and his mother were not treated as family but as slaves. From the tender age of 6, David's childhood was stolen. His nights were spent working at the skating rink until the early hours of the morning, a small boy forced into adult labor, perpetually exhausted and living in a fog of sleep deprivation. The physical labor was relentless, but it paled in comparison to the psychological and physical abuse. His father's discipline was swift, unpredictable, and brutal. A simple mistake could result in a merciless beating with a belt, a ritual of violence that became the soundtrack to David's youth. He learned to live in a state of hypervigilance, his nervous system constantly on high alert. He describes the sound of his father's car pulling into the driveway as a trigger for pure, paralyzing terror. He saw his mother endure even worse, and this constant exposure to violence and fear did more than leave physical scars. It fundamentally rewired his brain. This environment of toxic stress created a deep-seated belief within him that he was worthless, weak, and deserving of the pain he was receiving. The escape, when it finally came, was an act of incredible courage by his mother. She secretly saved what little money she could and planned their getaway. One day they fled to Brazil, Indiana, a small rural town where his grandparents lived. They had escaped the immediate clutches of his father, but the ghosts of that trauma followed them. Goggins makes it clear that you can change your location, but you can't run from the person you've become. The damage was already embedded in his soul. This is the foundation of his first challenge to us. You must confront the bad hand you were dealt. Before you can build anything new and stable, you have to excavate the broken foundations of your past. He asks us to conduct a fearless inventory. Write down every single thing that has held you back. The abuse, the poverty, the racism, the learning difficulties, the bullies, the bad luck. No judgment, no self-pity, just a cold, hard list. He calls this staring your resume of failures in the face. For Goggins, that list was long and brutal. By putting it on paper, he was no longer a victim of his circumstances. He was a strategist identifying the enemy forces he had to overcome. This act of confrontation is the first non-negotiable step toward taking control of your own narrative. Life in Brazil, Indiana, was a different kind of battlefield. The immediate terror of his father was gone, but it was replaced by the insidious poison of racism. As one of the only black families in town, they were constant targets. The N-word was a common sound, a weapon hurled at him from passing cars. He found a swastika and racial slurs carved into his school desk. The Ku Klux Klan was an active presence in the area. This constant social threat reinforced the feelings of worthlessness that his father had instilled in him. He felt like an outcast, hated for the color of his skin, and this further solidified his belief that something was fundamentally wrong with him. The trauma had also wreaked havoc on his ability to learn. The toxic stress of his childhood had created what he now understands as a severe learning disability. He couldn't retain information. Reading was a monumental struggle. He fell desperately behind in school. To survive, he built an elaborate facade. He became a master of lies and deception. He cheated on tests, forged his mother's signature, and cultivated an identity as the class clown, the kid who was too cool to care about grades. It was a defense mechanism to hide the terrifying truth. He believed he was stupid. He was living a lie, and the weight of it was crushing him. The lies caught up to him. A letter from the school revealed the truth to his mother. David was failing nearly every class. He was functionally illiterate. The mask was ripped off, and he was forced to confront the reality of his academic failure. He had to take remedial classes, a public confirmation of the very insecurity he had tried so hard to hide. He managed to scrape by, graduating high school by the thinnest of margins, and then drifted into the Air Force. But he took his old self with him, the self that always sought the path of least resistance. After the Air Force, his life went into a freefall. He took a dead-end job as a nighttime exterminator, spraying for cockroaches in the filthiest corners of the city. His days were spent sleeping, his nights were spent in grime. He sought comfort in food, and his weight skyrocketed. He would drink a gallon of chocolate milkshake and eat a box of donuts as a regular meal. He swelled to 297 pounds. He was living in a cheap apartment, earning just enough to get by, drowning in a sea of self-loathing and depression. He was a perfect portrait of unrealized potential. It was from this rock bottom that his most transformative tool emerged. He calls it the accountability mirror. One evening, slumped on his couch after another soul-crushing shift, he stumbled upon a television documentary about the grueling training of the Navy SEALs. He saw these men, lean, powerful, and mentally indomitable, enduring unimaginable hardship in the cold Pacific surf. They were everything he was not. The contrast between their reality and his own was so jarring, so deeply humiliating, that it lit a fuse in his soul. He dragged his bloated body into the bathroom and stared at his reflection. But for the first time, he didn't just glance away in disgust. He truly looked. He saw the fat on his body. He saw the defeat in his eyes. He saw the scared, cheating kid from Indiana. He saw a man who had lied to everyone, most of all to himself. In a moment of profound clarity, he decided the lies had to stop. He took a razor and shaved his head, a symbolic act of stripping away the old identity. He looked himself dead in the eye and spoke the ugly truth out loud. You're fat. You're a joke. You're living a pathetic life. It was a brutal, merciless self-assessment. And it was the most honest conversation he'd had in years. This became his new ritual. He armed himself with sticky notes. On each one, he wrote a goal or an uncomfortable truth. Lose 106 pounds. Stop being a weak bitch. Become a Navy SEAL. He plastered the mirror with these notes. Every morning and every night, he would stand before this shrine of accountability and report to himself. He had to face the man in the mirror and answer for his actions of the day. Did he work out? Did he eat right? Did he study? The mirror was an impartial judge. It didn't care about his past trauma or his excuses. It only reflected the present reality and the choices he was making in that moment. The accountability mirror is a tool of radical ownership. It forces you to become the CEO of your own life. You are both the boss and the employee, and you have to give yourself a performance review every single day. For Goggins, this raw, daily confrontation was the true beginning of his transformation. It was where he fired the old, weak David Goggins and hired the man he was determined to become. With the accountability mirror as his unforgiving guide, Goggins set a goal that sounded like a fantasy: lose 106 pounds and qualify for Navy SEAL training in under 3 months. The Navy recruiter he spoke to treated it as a joke. Not only was he morbidly obese by military standards, but the age cutoff for the program was fast approaching. The window of opportunity was impossibly small. This Herculean task forced him to embrace his third major principle: deliberately stepping out of your comfort zone. Goggins diagnosed his own life's problem: he was addicted to comfort. He had spent years avoiding pain, difficulty, and any form of suffering. To reverse the damage, he had to make discomfort his new home. He had to learn to love what most people hate. His physical transformation was a self-imposed boot camp. He purged his apartment of all junk food. His diet became brutally Spartan, a drastic reduction in calories that left him constantly hungry. The true war, however, was waged through exercise. He remembers his first attempt at a run. He could barely gasp his way through a quarter of a mile before his body seized up, his lungs on fire. He went home feeling defeated, but the man in the mirror was waiting for him, demanding more. So he went back out. And then he added layers of suffering. His days became a structured cycle of pain. He would wake up at 4:30 a.m. and get on a stationary bike for 2 hours. Then he would drive to a local pool and swim for another 2 hours. After that, he would head to the gym for a circuit training workout that lasted for hours, hammering the muscle groups he'd need for the rigors of BUD/S. He did this day after day. His body was a symphony of agony. He developed shin splints so severe he had to tape his legs up just to walk. Every muscle screamed in protest. It was during this time that he discovered the concept of callousing the mind. He realized that just as your hands build tough skin to protect against blisters, your mind can be hardened through consistent, voluntary hardship. Each time he wanted to quit, on the bike, in the pool, during a set of pull-ups, he would force himself to go a little bit further. He was training the whiny, comfort-seeking voice in his head to shut up. He was building mental calluses that made him more resistant to the impulse to quit. He was intentionally creating his own personal hell, and by doing so he was making himself immune to the fire. And the physical work was only half the battle. He still had to retake the ASVAB, the military entrance exam, and score high enough for the SEAL program. In the precious hours between his marathon workout sessions, he forced his undisciplined mind to focus. He studied for hours, reteaching himself the basic math and reading comprehension he had cheated his way through years ago. He was forging new neural pathways through sheer force of will. Against all odds, he succeeded. In less than 3 months, he walked back into that recruiter's office weighing a lean 191 pounds. He had aced the ASVAB. He was unrecognizable. But the most significant change wasn't visible. He had fundamentally altered his relationship with pain. He had learned that discomfort is the price of admission for growth. The challenge he presents to us is to find our own daily dose of suck. Do something that you don't want to do, every single day. It builds the mental fortitude necessary to handle the involuntary hardships that life will inevitably throw your way. Arriving at BUD/S, Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training, in Coronado, California, was the culmination of his impossible dream. But he quickly discovered that the hell he had put himself through to get there was just a pre-game warm-up. BUD/S is engineered to find your single greatest weakness, physical, mental, or emotional, and crush you with it. The environment is a constant assault on the senses. You are always cold, always wet, always covered in sand, and always on the verge of sleep. The instructors are experts in psychological warfare, their taunts designed to burrow into your brain and plant seeds of doubt. This is the forge where he created his fourth powerful concept, taking souls. This predatory mindset was born during the infamous Hell Week, a 5.5-day marathon of non-stop training where candidates are allowed a maximum of 4 hours of sleep in total. It is the ultimate gut check, designed to weed out anyone who isn't 100% committed. Goggins had to endure Hell Week 3 times. On his first attempt, he was performing at a high level, but his body betrayed him. He developed severe pneumonia and double stress fractures in his legs. The medical team pulled him from training. Failure. On his second attempt, a kneecap injury forced him to be rolled back again. Failure. By the time he limped to the starting line for his third Hell Week, he was a marked man. The instructors saw him as broken, a guy who just didn't have what it takes. They smelled blood in the water and targeted him relentlessly. During one particularly brutal evolution, paddling heavy inflatable boats through the crashing, freezing surf, one instructor made it his personal mission to break Goggins. He screamed in his face, calling him a failure, a quitter, daring him to ring the brass bell that signifies surrender. Goggins was at his limit, exhausted, in excruciating pain and emotionally battered. The thought of quitting was a sweet siren song. But then, something inside him shifted. He looked at the screaming instructor, who was also cold and tired, and instead of cowering, he felt a surge of defiance. He realized this was a battle of wills. He made a conscious decision. He was not just going to endure this torment, he was going to feed on it. He was going to take this man's soul. He started to smile. As other trainees shivered in misery, Goggins grinned. When the instructor screamed, Goggins screamed back, "Hoo-yah!" with genuine enthusiasm. He started moving with an intensity that bordered on joyful. He was communicating a very clear nonverbal message: your negativity is my fuel. The more you try to break me, the stronger I get. You will quit on me before I quit on you. Taking souls is this act of psychological dominance. It's about turning the tables on your adversary. In any competitive environment, your opponent wants to see you suffer. They want to see you gasping for air, slowing down, showing signs of weakness. Taking their soul is about showing them the opposite. You reveal a well of energy and will that they cannot comprehend, and it demoralizes them. It makes them question their own limits, their own preparation. Goggins and his boat crew began to dominate the evolution, moving with a ferocity that stunned the instructors. They eventually left him alone. He had won the mental war. The mission for us is to apply this killer instinct. In your work, your sport, your studies, when the competition thinks you should be fading, find another gear. Let them see that your will to succeed is greater than their will to watch you fail. Surviving Hell Week was a monumental victory, but the war was not over. The remaining weeks of BUD/S were a long, painful grind, and Goggins's body was a wreck. The stress fractures in his legs were a constant source of agony. To endure this prolonged suffering, he needed a new mental tool, a reserve tank of fuel for when the main engine stalled. This led to the creation of his fifth concept, the cookie jar. The cookie jar is a mental inventory of past triumphs. It's a metaphorical jar that you fill with memories of every obstacle you've ever overcome, every time you defied the odds and succeeded. It is your personal highlight reel of resilience. When you find yourself in a moment of extreme duress, when your mind is screaming at you to surrender, you mentally reach into this jar, pull out a cookie and savor it. Each cookie is a potent reminder of your own capabilities. It's tangible proof that you have faced down hell before and walked out the other side. For Goggins, the cookie jar was overflowing. When the pain in his legs was unbearable during a long run on the beach, he'd pull out the "I lost 106 pounds in 3 months" cookie. This reminded him of the discipline and focus he was capable of. When he felt intellectually inferior during a complex navigation exercise, he'd pull out the "I taught myself to read and aced the ASVAB" cookie. When the cold water of the Pacific threatened to break his spirit, he'd pull out the "I survived 2 other hell weeks" cookie. He could even reach way back and pull out the "I stood up to my father" cookie, a reminder of his earliest victory over fear. The cookie jar is a strategy for talking yourself through moments of weakness. It's an active, conscious process of replacing negative self-talk with undeniable evidence of your own strength. The key is the specificity. You don't just remember, "That was hard." You remember the details, the feeling of the cold, the sound of your own labored breathing, the overwhelming urge to quit, and the incredible feeling of pushing through it. By vividly recalling these past victories, you provide your brain with the fuel it needs to override the short-term pain signals. He used this technique to armor his mind. The cookies became his shield. He paired this with powerful visualization, constantly seeing himself in his dress whites at graduation. The cookie jar provided the evidence that this vision was not a fantasy, but an achievable destiny. It gave him the strength to endure, day after painful day, until he finally stood on that graduation stage. He had become Navy SEAL. The mission he gives us is to start curating our own cookie jar. Take the time today to write down every significant victory of your life. Passing a tough exam, finishing a project, getting a job, running your first 5K, surviving a personal tragedy. No victory is too small. This list is your personal arsenal. When you face your next great challenge, you won't be starting from scratch. You'll have a jar full of proof that you are a survivor, a warrior, and that you are capable of far more than you feel in that moment of pain. After achieving the impossible and becoming a Navy SEAL, a new and insidious enemy began to creep into Goggins's life: complacency. He had reached the summit. He was part of an elite brotherhood. The constant, desperate striving that had defined him began to fade. He was in danger of becoming comfortable. This realization led him to the discovery of his sixth principle, the famous 40% rule. To reignite his fire, and to raise money for the families of fallen comrades, he decided to enter the world of ultramarathons. He found a qualifying race for the legendary Badwater 135, a 100-mile race in San Diego. The race was in 3 days. He had done zero specific training for this kind of endurance event. His preparation consisted of a folding chair and a box of crackers. The race began, and for the first 50 or 60 miles, his formidable SEAL conditioning carried him. He felt strong. But around mile 70, his body staged a full-scale rebellion. His kidneys began to shut down, and he was urinating blood. He lost control of his bladder and bowels. The tiny metatarsal bones in his feet began to crack under the relentless pounding. The pain was absolute and all-encompassing. His mind, the fortress he had worked so hard to build, was flashing one signal over and over: stop. This is dangerous. You are done. He collapsed into his folding chair at an aid station, a broken man. He was ready to quit. But then, a thought surfaced from the depths of his training. It was the idea that when your mind tells you that you are 100% done, that you have absolutely nothing left, you are in reality only at 40% of your body's true capacity. This is the 40% rule. Our brains are hardwired for survival, not for peak performance. The brain's job is to protect the body, so it sends out distress signals, pain, fatigue, doubt, long before the body is truly at its physical limit. It's a protective governor. Most of us hear that 40% signal, and we obey it. We stop. Goggins realized that this signal wasn't a wall, it was a test. It was an invitation to access the other 60% of his potential that was locked away behind a door of pain and fear. Sitting in that chair, humiliated and in agony, he decided to test the rule. He forced himself to his feet. He began a slow, agonizing walk. Then he shuffled. He describes the last 30 miles of that race as a surreal, out-of-body experience. He was running on pure will, fueled by the desire to see what was on the other side of that 40% wall. He crossed the finish line in just under 19 hours. He had qualified for Badwater. This experience taught him that our perceived limits are a fiction created by our own minds. We are all capable of so much more than we allow ourselves to believe. The mission for us is to start challenging that 40% voice. The next time you're working out and you think you're spent, do 5 more reps. The next time you feel mentally exhausted from work, push through and finish 1 more task. By consistently pushing into that zone of discomfort, you begin to rewrite your own internal narrative about what you can handle. You unlock that hidden 60%, and that is where you discover who you can truly become. Still searching for new ways to challenge himself, Goggins set his sights on another legendary crucible of military excellence, the U.S. Army Ranger School. This elite leadership course is infamous for its punishing physical demands, but also for its intense academic and tactical components. For Goggins, whose deepest insecurity had always been his intellectual ability, this was a special kind of test. It wasn't enough to be the toughest, he had to be one of the smartest under conditions of extreme duress. This pursuit laid the groundwork for his 7th mission: remove the governor. Think of the governor on an engine. It's a device that limits its maximum output to prevent it from blowing up. Goggins posits that we all have a similar governor on our minds. It's our built-in tendency to settle, to ease up, to operate at a comfortable 70 or 80% of our capacity. Removing the governor is the daily practice of pushing that baseline performance level just a little bit higher, day after day. At Ranger School, Goggins was once again an outsider, a Navy guy in a sea of Army green. He quickly found himself struggling with the classroom portion of the training, complex mission planning, map overlays, and strategic doctrine. He was failing the written tests and was in real danger of being washed out. He knew his default mode of just being a physical beast wouldn't save him here. He had to out-strategize his own weakness. He implemented a ruthless system of time management. After grueling days of patrols and physical tasks, when every other candidate was collapsing into their bunks for a few precious hours of sleep, Goggins got to work. He would find a secluded spot, what he called his mental dungeon, and he would study. He sacrificed sleep for study, meticulously going over his notes, drawing maps, and memorizing procedures until he had them cold. He was actively recalibrating his own governor. His body and mind were screaming for rest, but he pushed past that signal. He learned to operate on a level of sleep deprivation and mental focus that was beyond what he thought was possible. He began to ace the tests. He earned the respect of his peers and his instructors, not just for his toughness but for his sheer will to learn. He graduated Ranger School, a rare achievement for someone from the Naval Special Warfare community. The mission for us is to identify and gently push our own governors every day. It's about incremental, sustained effort. If you normally stop working at 5 p.m., work until 5:15. If you can do 10 push-ups, go for 11 tomorrow. It's not about a single, heroic effort. It's about making a habit of going just a little bit beyond your comfort zone. Over time, these small, consistent pushes redefine your baseline. Your capacity for work, for focus, for endurance expands. Removing the governor is how you turn extraordinary effort into your new normal. One of Goggins's most famous undertakings was a battle against a simple steel bar. He set his sights on breaking the Guinness World Record for the most pull-ups completed in 24 hours. The existing record was an astonishing 4,020. This quest is the backdrop for his 8th mission, Schedule Your Life. His first attempt at the record was a high-profile media event, broadcast live on television. He was riding a wave of confidence, but he was ill-prepared strategically. He relied on his legendary grit, going out too fast with poor form. His hands tore to shreds. His muscles gave out. He failed spectacularly, falling far short of the record. A few months later, he tried again. He trained harder but still lacked a precise plan. He failed again, this time with a serious muscle injury. He was publicly humiliated twice. Most people would have abandoned the goal. But Goggins treated these failures not as defeats but as data. He realized his problem wasn't a lack of will, but a lack of a meticulous plan. For his 3rd attempt, he transformed from a warrior into a scientist. He conducted a brutal after-action report on his failures and engineered a new approach. He understood that motivation and emotion were unreliable fuel sources for a 24-hour endeavor. The key was structure and discipline. He broke the goal of 4,030 pull-ups, he aimed to beat the record by 10, into a detailed mathematical equation. He calculated the exact number of pull-ups per minute, the optimal number of reps per set, and the precise rest intervals needed. He assembled a support team to manage his hydration, nutrition, and pacing. He researched and installed a new pull-up bar designed to minimize hand tearing. Most importantly, he created a microschedule for the entire 24-hour period. Every minute was accounted for. He had a plan for every set, every sip of water, every bite of food. He had turned a chaotic test of will into a controlled, scientific experiment. When the day came, he executed the plan with robotic precision. The pain was still there, his hands still bled, but it was all part of the equation. It was expected and managed. He was no longer reacting to the pain, he was acting according to the schedule. In just under 17 hours, he calmly broke the world record. The profound lesson here is that discipline eats motivation for breakfast. Motivation is a feeling, an emotion that comes and goes. A schedule is a commitment. Goggins challenges us to stop wasting the precious minutes of our day. He advocates for time blocking, dividing your day into small, manageable chunks and assigning each one a specific task. This eliminates the mental drain of deciding what to do next and combats the pull of procrastination. By scheduling your life, you build a fortress of discipline that makes your biggest goals not just possible but inevitable. By this stage of his life, David Goggins was a Navy SEAL, an Army Ranger, and a world record holder. By any definition, he was uncommon. But for Goggins, reaching the summit is never the end of the journey. It's merely a vantage point from which to spot the next, higher peak. This relentless drive is the heart of his 9th mission: be uncommon amongst uncommon. It's one thing to be the hardest worker in an average gym. It's a completely different challenge to be the hardest worker in a room filled with the most elite operators in the world. Seeking the ultimate test of his abilities, Goggins decided to try out for the U.S. Army's Delta Force, a Tier 1 special missions unit widely considered to be the best of the best. He entered the grueling selection process with a clear philosophy. He was not there simply to pass or to blend in. He was there to set the standard. He made it his mission to be the first to volunteer for the most punishing tasks. He consistently carried the heaviest equipment on long ruck marches. He was always at the front of the formation. His goal was to make his work ethic so undeniable that it stood out even in a crowd of genetic freaks and seasoned warriors. He wanted to be uncommon amongst the uncommon. This mindset is a powerful antidote to the poison of complacency. It is human nature to achieve a great goal and then to relax to feel that we've made it. Goggins argues this is the most dangerous moment in any successful person's life. The instant you believe you are good enough is the instant you begin your decline. True mastery, in his view, is a state of perpetual hunger. It is an internal fire that is never satisfied with past accomplishments. After you achieve something great, you allow yourself a brief moment to acknowledge it, and then you immediately get back to work. You find a new, more formidable challenge and put yourself right back at the bottom of a new mountain. The mission for us is to adopt this relentless mindset. Look at the top performers in your chosen field. Don't just aspire to be like them. Aspire to outwork them. Aim to be more disciplined, more prepared, and more driven. This is not born of arrogance, but of a deep desire to explore the absolute limits of your own potential. It's about setting a personal standard that is so high, it makes even the elite take notice. It is a commitment to a life where good enough is never good enough. Life, however, has a way of presenting challenges that cannot be overcome with grit and discipline alone. Goggins's greatest battle came not from an external enemy, but from a silent traitor within his own body. This shocking discovery forms the basis of his 10th mission, the empowerment of failure. During a medical screening, doctors found that Goggins had a significant atrial septal defect, a hole in his heart. It was a congenital condition he'd had his entire life. The doctors were flabbergasted. They could not comprehend how a man with a heart functioning at roughly 70% capacity could have become a Navy SEAL, an Army Ranger, and an elite ultramarathoner. For his entire life, his body and brain had been chronically starved of oxygen. The diagnosis required 2 open-heart surgeries. His career as an active-duty operator was over in an instant. The very foundation of his identity, the invincible warrior, the endurance machine, was shattered. He plunged into a deep depression, feeling like a complete failure. But it was in this pit of despair that he refined one of his most crucial mental tools, the After-Action Report, AAR. The AAR is a military debriefing tool used to analyze a mission in a cold, unemotional, and fact-based way. The goal is not to assign blame, but to learn. What went right? What went wrong? How can we improve? Goggins began to apply this clinical process to his own life's failures. Instead of drowning in the emotion of his failed pull-up attempts, he dissected them. Instead of seeing his heart condition as a tragic curse, he analyzed it as a new piece of data. This reframing was transformative. He conducted an AAR on his entire life. He realized he hadn't achieved everything in spite of some unknown toughness. He had achieved everything while being profoundly, physiologically disadvantaged from birth. This didn't make him a failure. It made his accomplishments even more monumental. The failure was not the hole in his heart. The failure would be to let that hole define the rest of his life. The AAR process allowed him to strip the emotion away from his setbacks and see them for what they were, incredible learning opportunities. The mission for us is to embrace this powerful tool. Stop viewing failure as a final verdict on your worth. When you fail, give yourself a brief moment to feel the sting, and then become a scientist. Take out a notebook. Analyze what happened. What factors were in your control? What factors were not? What specific actions led to the negative outcome? What systems can you put in place to ensure it doesn't happen again? This process turns failure from a source of shame into your greatest teacher. It is the engine of adaptation and the key to building true, lasting resilience. The final chapter in this incredible saga is not a conclusion, but a philosophy for living. It is encapsulated in his 11th and final mission, which revolves around a simple but profound question: what if? For many, the phrase "what if" is a lament, a backward glance at missed opportunities and regrets. Goggins reclaims this question and turns it into a powerful engine for future growth. He doesn't ask "what if" about the past. He asks it about the future. He constantly probes the edges of his own potential by asking, what if I'm capable of even more? What if everything I've done is just the beginning? What if I can go further? This question is his antidote to complacency. It is the force that drives him out of bed every morning in search of new challenges. He urges us to stop living for a polished resume, that curated list of successes we present to the world. Our true story, he contends, is written in our struggles, our scars, and our comebacks. A life well lived is not one devoid of failure, but one that is rich with the lessons learned from it. To truly live is to be willing to fail, to get back up, and to go again. To embrace this final mission is to cultivate a relentless curiosity about your own limits. It is to reject the notion of a finish line. When you conquer one mountain, you don't build a house on top of it, you look for a taller one on the horizon. You live in a state of positive, perpetual striving. You learn to find joy in the effort, not just the outcome. You constantly challenge yourself with that endlessly powerful question, what if? This is how you ensure your story is never finished. It is the ultimate expression of a mind that has been mastered and a life that has defied all odds. What you walk away with from this story is a profound sense of agency. It dismantles the myth that we are simply products of our circumstances and replaces it with the empowering truth that we are the architects of our own character. It's a blueprint for forging strength not in spite of your hardships, but because of them. To bring this into your life right now, try this. Think of one small, nagging task you've been putting off for days. Maybe it's cleaning out that cluttered drawer, making that difficult phone call, or even just stretching for 10 minutes. Don't think about it. Just get up and do it right now. As you do it, pay attention to the voice in your head that resists, that whines, that wants to be comfortable. Acknowledge it, and then deliberately ignore it. That small act is your first rep in the gym of mental toughness. When you look back on your life from your final days, will your greatest regret be the things you tried and failed, or the things you were too afraid to even attempt? You are in danger of living a life so comfortable and soft that you will die without ever realizing your true potential. Thanks for listening to the Wisdom Mind Library. Until next time, I'm Daisy.